panel, you'll be hearing from my colleagues in the Army QDR office, and certainly to the other panelists will have an idea on that. In strength and force structure, force mix, I think will be issues. Like I said, I can't tell you kind of what the outcome or where the emphasis will be, but the in strength and the grow the force idea, for not just for the ground forces, but I think for all the services, will be an issue. It's a vague answer to your question, but I'm not sure how much more I can say, given that it really will be up to the next administration. But I know from talking to some of my colleagues, at least in the Army, I haven't heard so much from the Marine Corps, but that it will be an issue. Again, the tempo and the pacing will be an issue, and the force mix will be an issue that they will want to address. I would defer to the Army in the next panel for the specifics.
On the interagency, first of all, retrospectively, the interagency played very little role up until the 2005 QDR. There was an attempt to involve the interagency, particularly early on. Representatives were brought in for what were originally Saturday sessions that were meant to be sort of big think issue-specific or mission-specific sessions. There was also somewhat of a, others will remember better, but somewhat of a standing invitation to particular members of the interagency to participate. But again, it was within DoD on our terms. I was an hour then. I guess I'm not now, but on the terms of the department. So bringing interagency players in to sit at the table at DoD to give their perspective, sort of as a person, one among many people, but one without a vote. So that was definitely a step forward. I think the next QDR, again, will have to really jump the big divide and be nested within a broader interagency whole, whether that's a review, whether that's a particular kind of PCC, DCPC approach that's driven by strategy and planning. Whatever that is, there needs to be that nesting. And then I also think, obviously, you'll want, and I think no matter who wins, you will see a much greater openness to interagency participation in various parts of the QDR. I think we're extremely far away from a point where the true hard deliberations of the QDR will be done outside the purview of the Secretary of Defense. It's his or her right to shape the recommendations to the President. But in order to do that effectively, and I think both campaigns clearly see this, they're going to need to understand what other agencies can bring, what they think their missions are, clarifying roles and responsibilities, etc.
Hi, I'm Don Ahern with the Reserve Air Forces Policy Board staff. I was wondering if you could talk about how the interplay between the QDR and the BRAC, they seem to confound each other a little last time, and any lessons to be drawn from that.
Again, I'm going off of memory. My recollection is BRAC was ahead of the QDR by about a year in terms of the decisions. I may have my time frame slightly wrong, but I'm just trying to recall meetings, and my recollection is when I was working BRAC issues, I was not working QDR issues. So I think they were offset in terms of the proposals that went to the Hill. Now, that doesn't mean that the actual process of bracking, that was active during the time of the QDR, and there was, I would argue, almost no interaction at that point between the two processes.
Good morning. My name is Brian Byrne, and I'm from U.S. Northern Command. Northern Command relies heavily on the reserve component as a whole to accomplish its homeland defense and civil support missions. And I would be interested to hear from each of the panel members what you think the QDR ought to enter into deliberations in terms of reinforcing the relationship between U.S. Northern Command and the reserve component. Whether that be the National Guard itself at the state level, or bringing reservists on active duty for short periods of time for civil support missions.
I think we need to advance beyond where we have been over the past 5 years with NORTHCOM and the National Guard reserve components to where we have a more integrated solution. There may be ways to do the mission there may be ways to accomplish that that don't require a unity of command. We do it all over the place. We do it in, OCONUS operations. We do coalition operations all the time. I think what we need to do is find a way to serve the nation and get the job done. And I think we've started to make a lot of progress in that. And I would imagine that the QDR ought to be looking at the Homeland Defense capabilities and the things that we will need to perform the missions that the department's going to be requested to do, whether those missions are performed in a federal status or a state status.
I think you have to start with the basic premise that I spoke of a little earlier about the obligation that we have to the American people. And frankly, if there's an emergency inside this country, they don't care what your uniform says. All they want to do is be helped out of whatever emergency they're in. So I think it's our responsibility to figure out, and I don't think we've gotten there yet, how we work as one team. And as Todd said, there's a number of ways we can get at this problem, but we need to take every resource we have in this country when we have an emergency in homeland America, hometown America, and we need to apply it to that problem, which means we've got to get over the issue of, well, I belong to the Guard, well, I belong to the Reserve, and therefore the two shall not meet. If you've got a capability in a town and you've got an emergency in that town, the best people to respond to that emergency are the people that live in that town and the surrounding communities, because they know the people, they know the situation, and they know how to get the problem solved, and they care more than anybody else in this country because it's their hometown people. You know, I had a very significant personal experience watching a thing on TV a couple of years ago where I was watching a 19-year-old member of the Louisiana National Guard down in Katrina go in and rescue his grandmother in a little pirogue, like they use down in Louisiana. And so I think we've got to get over that and work it out, and I believe we can. It's just we've got to get everybody at the table.